Okay, Brother Paul, in the mid-1960s, you were working at Xaverian College in Maryland. Can you tell us a little bit about the social issues at the time and how the students became involved in them?
The 1960s, I've turned it the best of times and the worst of times. The worst of times was the country was in chaos and turmoil. All kinds of revolutions were going on, and student protests and strikes, and all kinds of damage to property and so forth. So on. That was the worst of times. But it was also the best of times, in my opinion, because young people began to think about what's going on in our country, what's going on in our world, what's with this Vietnam War, especially young people who said, I may be in Vietnam before I know it. You know, I'm 16, 17, or 18 years of age, and I have to register for the draft, and I may be picked and given a rifle and said, go over to Vietnam and kill the opposition. So a lot of people were concerned. When I got down to Xaverian College, our young brothers were very much involved in the civil rights movement and in protests against the Vietnam War. As far as civil rights are concerned, they wanted to be part of the civil rights movement, and the civil rights leaders, Ralph Abernathy being one of them, the big civil rights leader, asked if some shelters could be constructed on our property in Silver Spring, Maryland, Xaverian College. Well, we said yes, and we didn't get a very, very warm reception from neighbors who were saying, you know, those brothers are bringing out all kinds of hippies and so forth and so on. Martin Luther King came one day and wanted to see what other things were going on. There was going to be a poor people's march on Washington, and these things were being constructed on our property, were going to be transported down to Washington, and people could live in them, like lean-tos and so forth, and tents. So our young brothers were very, very much interested in that. Also, protests against the Vietnam War, and that was reflected in society. You know, high school and college students wondered what this war is all about. You know, why are we in Vietnam? And so they were bringing me along. I wasn't bringing them along. They were kind of bringing me along. In 1970, in June of 70, we had to close the college because the enrollment had gone down, and although we had seminarians from other small religious orders coming for an education, this was a junior college that we ran. Financially, we couldn't afford it. The numbers had gone down, and we just couldn't afford to keep operating this junior college. So it closed in 1970. Well, I tried to get another college job, and I couldn't. So I went back to high school. I went back to Xaverian Brothers High School in Westwood. And there I was assigned to teach seniors, 1970-71 school year, seniors church history. Well, that really wasn't my field, let's say. I knew something about theology and whatnot. It was one of the worst years of my life. I could not get the students to settle down and to concentrate. Kids were saying to me, we're not interested in church history. I don't care what happened in 300. I don't care what happened in 750 AD. You know? We're a now generation. And, I was showing my frustration, my anger, I suppose. And one kid said to me, does the church have anything to say about this war? And if it does, why didn't you teach that? So that was an idea that I thought about, and went to the headmaster and said, the student suggested that I teach something on the war. Could I do it? And he said, yes. So that's when I started fashioning a course. And I called it Christian Attitudes Towards War and Peace. I stole the title of a book by a Quaker who taught at Yale Divinity School in New Haven. His name was Roland Bateman. And that's what I did. I started teaching about Christian attitudes towards war and peace. And I started to incorporate into this course films. I was getting 16 millimeter films to illustrate, some of the aspects of what I was talking about in the course. It began to grow. Kids seemed to be interested, and they liked all the visuals, and I just happened, so I said, let's keep going. Early in that year, 1970-71, a graduate of the school, graduated from Xaverian Brothers High School, the first graduating class, came up to me and said, would you help me? I have to go. I'm applying to be a conscientious objector for the Vietnam War. And would you help me? Would you write a letter in support of me? Would you come with me to the draft board? I said, I'd be happy to. I would be happy to. So that's what I did. Some of his relatives came from Europe, and they were caught up in drafts and so forth, in wars they didn't want to fight. So anyway, I wrote a statement, and I accompanied him to the draft board. I sat in my black suit. I was not asked any questions. I was allowed to sit there. And so I just sat there quietly, and 3 or 4 men, members of the draft board, quizzed him, and he responded very, very nicely and so forth. And that was it. So they thanked him, they thanked me, and that was it. So I went back to his house, and we were having, cookies and coffee and whatnot with his mother. And all of a sudden, George Sullivan, who was a judge, a famous judge, also an All-American Notre Dame football player back in the mid-40s. He had a couple of kids in school. He came bursting into the house and said, you got it. I was just thrilled. I said to myself, this kid, who's now in his early 20s, he has a real understanding of what nonviolence is all about. He's willing to do alternative service. He's willing to go into the Peace Corps, but he doesn't want to learn how to shoot guns and kill people he has no quarrel with. So I'm teaching this course. It's 1974, I believe the year was 1974. And I'm at a social, an evening social. And a lot of parents were there, and there was a parent who was manning the coffee table. And I wandered over, I didn't know her, and she wanted to know who I was and what I taught. And I said, well, I teach religion. And she said, oh, you teach religion? She said, you ought to come down to our parish. There's a fellow by the name of Charles McCarthy. He's a layman, and he is giving a course on Christian nonviolence. And I think you'd really enjoy it. So why don't you come down next week? So I said, okay. Well, I didn't. I forgot all about it. About a week later, I'm going from one part of the building to the other, and I'm passing through the school office to get from one side to the other of the school. And standing at the counter was this woman, Pat Furbish, her name was. And she looked at me and she said, I thought you said we were going to come down to our parish and hear Charles McCarthy. I said, oh, I forgot. Well, she said, don't forget. And he's very, very good. So I said, yes. Well, guess what? I forgot. A week or two later, I have a free period. I'm leaving the brother's house to go to a parking lot to get into a car to drive down to the post office to mail a letter. As I'm coming out the brother's entrance to go to the car, a car comes up and parks at the curb, and out of the car is Pat Furbish. She said to me, I'm really disappointed in you. I thought you were a man of your word, and you didn't come, and you missed a golden opportunity. I said, well, I'll come. I really will come next week. He's not in our parish. He's finished in our parish. But he's in another parish. Now you go to St. Joseph's in Needham, and you hear him. He'll open your eyes and clear out your ears. So out of what we call human respect, because God was sending her. I really believe that. This was no coincidence that I kept meeting her. So I went to St. Joseph's Parish and didn't know anybody. There were about 15 people there. It was a dimly lit room on the basement of the school. I sat there. I was supposed to start at 7:30, 20 minutes to 8, no sign of Charles McCarthy. 7:15, no show. 10 minutes of 8, I'm ready to leave. I'm getting up, and all of a sudden he walks in. And so he said, let's get started. And so he's coughing and clearing his throat. I'm saying to myself, oh, God, this speaker is just going to be terrible. I can't get up down. I cannot get up down. Well, he started to speak. And it's the only time in my life that I ever could not go to sleep at night. Because what he had to say that night, and I can't repeat exactly what he said, all I know is what he had to say was so mind-blowing, can I use that word? I was thinking of what he said and the implications of what he said. And I was kind of wrestling in my mind with his ideas. I mean, the next day I must have been like a zombie going to the class because I had no sleep. And then I said to myself, I gotta finish this. I gotta go back the next week. But already at St. Joseph's, we had gone 4 weeks. So I was in like week 5 of 8. Every other Tuesday, let's say, he had something more interesting and more thought-provoking to say. So the thing happened. I said, I gotta hear the beginning of this. Are you ever going to go anyplace else to give this 8-week course? He said, yes. As a matter of fact, they're going out to the Worcester Diocese, to Southborough. There's a church out in Southborough, and I'm going to be starting next week or the week after. I said, I'll be there, and I'll bring 2 other brothers. So the 3 of us went out to Southborough and listened to the whole. Well, what did that do to my teaching? It enriched it, enlivened it. Charles McCarthy was a layman. He dreamed of being a Marine Corps pilot and he went to Notre Dame. He got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree at Notre Dame, and he got a law degree from Boston College. And what happened was, he was asked to start at the University of Notre Dame a course on nonviolence and conflict resolution. And that's what he did. Well, I won't get into the long story of why he left, but he came back to Massachusetts. He's a graduate of Malden Catholic, one of the Severian Brothers schools. And so I just changed the course. The focus was on theology. It was on why you should be thinking this way. It was all about putting on the mind of Christ. It's Christ in the Gospels, violent or nonviolent. Did he teach an ethic of violence or teach an ethic of nonviolence? How about the apostles? How about the early church? How about Acts of the Apostles? How about the first 3 centuries of the church? And so forth. So I was digging and researching and so forth and so on. And, the course exploded, in the sense of by trying to make it better. A lot of kids didn't buy what I had to say, but that's okay. A lot of people didn't buy what Jesus had to say, but they heard. See, you can't reject something you've never heard. See, So, and that's the problem with the Catholic Church today, as far as teaching on nonviolence. We don't teach it. So we teach something called the just war theory, which is, a theory that's got all kinds of, it's like Swiss cheese. It's got loads of holes in it. Charles McCarthy was married. He had 12 kids. His 13th child died about 8 hours after she was born. But he still has 12 kids, so he raised, and his wife was from Boston College too. He met her at Boston College. So they raised a family of 12. One of the girls, Benedicta, swallowed a whole bottle of, I think it was Tylenol or some kind of aspirin, and her liver and kidneys got shot. I mean, she was in the Mass General, and she was ready to die. So everybody started praying for a miracle, and they prayed to a Jewish convert who became a Carmelite nun. Her name was Edith Stein. And though the fact that she was a Catholic Carmelite nun, she had Jewish blood in her, and she was arrested and deported to Auschwitz and was exterminated with her sister in 1943. Edith Stein was very, very important to the McCarthy family, so they prayed to Edith Stein. Well, guess what happened? She had turned yellow and blue and everything else like that. The doctors were practically giving up. And then they noticed a change. 3 days later, like Jesus in the tomb, 3 days later. 3 days later, she began to improve, to the point where she could eat, she could talk. She walked out with a balloon in her hand from the Mass General. Her Jewish doctor, Ronald Kleiner, a Mass General, testified at the Vatican that he could not explain. Anyway, she was canonized. Pope John Paul II canonized her at the Vatican. The Stein family was there, all the Jewish members of the Stein family. All of the McCarthys were there. They had a wonderful a meal together, and so forth and so on. And the church in Brockton is now named St. Edith Stein's parish, So anyway, it's been important to know Father McCarthy, because in 1982, he became a Catholic Melkite priest. He became not a Roman Catholic, but a Catholic Melkite priest in union with Rome. So he was ordained. He's been a priest 40 years. And he has been a tremendous influence in my life. Tremendous influence on my life. So that's part of my story. And that part of my story, too, is getting to know the chaplain, the Academy chaplain, who was chaplain to the crews that dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. His name is Father George Sabelka, and he was from Flint, Michigan. He's the only person I've ever heard to preach. Now, I go to Mass a lot in the 72 years of as being a brother. He's the only one I ever who preached on love your enemies. I'd have many a priest dodge it. Love your enemies. They talk about something else. But he decided he was going to tackle that one and do a superb job. So I've been very blessed to know these people along the way, and they've shaped my life. That's a long-winded answer to a short question, Chris. But I think it's part of the whole story.